Protesters dressed up like handmaids outside Brett Kavanaugh's Senate hearing. So his hearing is kind of like Comic-Con, but with even more fear of vaginas. Bob Woodward's new book alleges that President Trump said Jeff Sessions is mentally disabled. That's incredibly offensive. There is no need to insult the mentally disabled like that. And finally, people are destroying their Nike gear to protest Colin Kaepernick's new Just Do It ad campaign. Nike understands their concern and is urging protesters to buy lots and lots of more Nike gear so they have plenty to destroy. The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
I want you to want me. Welcome to the Trump Report. I am Christian Bladt, joined, making a triumphant return, our friend Brooke Soliz. Thank you so much, Brooke, for being here, because in all honesty, if you were not here today, we wouldn't be doing the show.
Well, I really missed you guys. I'm so glad to be here. It just feels good to be back in this chair.
Yeah, and there's so much fun to talk about. There's always, just light. Well, there are, legitimately, there are a couple of more lighthearted conversations this week. There are weeks where it's a bit of a drag, but
pretty serious.
There's times where you just have to laugh, and
we're gonna have fun today.
Fortunately, there's some good things to laugh about, and we are going to have fun. And if you're watching live in the chat, please comment, and if you're watching the archive version, also comment. But if you're commenting live, we will get to your comments a little bit later in the show.
Yes.
So, as I alluded to, I think we should start with the Brett Kavanaugh hearing that eventually started, and there were a lot of delays. And I will give my hot take on this before I ask Brooke what you think.
Let's hear it.
And I think I would have found the whole thing a little bit more genuine if, one, it wasn't a room full of Democratic senators who had said, we are not voting for this man, and two, it wasn't a room full of Democratic senators who we know are running for president. It was a lot of grandstanding, a lot of like, well, how are we supposed to read these 43,000 pages of documents even though we're not going to vote for him? How are we supposed to read? I think that it was actually Ted Cruz made that point. It's not about the documents. You don't need to read them. You already know you don't like them. And maybe legitimately you know. So there was a lot of carrying on. And I think that Chuck Grassley has the patience, not a guy that I think I ever would have voted for if it was my district. But I have to admire him for how much rope he was willing to give everybody to just kind of keep going,
It's a grandstand.
He's like, he wouldn't let them talk at first. And then he's like, all right, let's just let this happen. And they, he had a sort of a funny line about they were taking advantage of his generosity because they were saying he wasn't generous. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've been pretty generous. So, it was very interesting because it was unfolding while I was at the gym, because can't you tell I go to the gym a lot? But I was just watching, and a lot of people were walking by, and they stopped and they were just like, what's going on now? Because it was just visually very interesting because they were all very animated. Cory Booker. Yeah.
Booker,
that should definitely be a GIF or GIF, depending on how you pronounce it. So the Brett Kavanaugh, give us your thoughts on, well, really all of it, and I will call it a spectacle. It was definitely a spectacle.
GIF, by the way, since it's graphic.
I always say GIF, but I've been corrected, probably by those millennials.
It's probably millennials who are trying to.
GIF is peanut butter, and if they'd like to be a sponsor, we would be happy to have them.
We do love peanut butter.
Yeah, Skippy, if you're listening, that's fine too. Anyway.
Okay, so I caught bits and pieces of it as well because I was in community property class today.
Which sounds fun.
Figuring out how to.
Should we spend an hour on community property?
Everything's community property between me and my future ex-husband. But
that's right, boys. Did you hear that? Future ex-husband.
I'm horrible. Yes, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, they all got on their presidential soapboxes today and made their grandstanding gestures. I will say, just to play devil's advocate, that I do believe that it's unfair to the American people and the judicial process that the Democrats, maybe some who might truly want to know more about Kavanaugh, although they already know,
it's 100%
should have had the opportunity to read these documents.
What I think they said 15 hours ago.
Yeah, on Labor Day.
Yeah.
And
hey, it's a day of working, so you should be working.
The irony.
Yeah.
And they won't let them.
Thank you. Oh, in the booth, Jeff Graham. So thank you, Jeff.
The
newly married Jeff Graham. Congratulations.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of marriages, we won't talk about divorce, Jeff. We're sorry about that. But if you need a lawyer, I'm just kidding.
Much appreciated. I've taken notes on all of this, you guys.
That's right.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness. So I will say that it's unfair to the judicial process that that's not being allowed, that it's not being delayed, which I really think it should. But we all know, too, that every single Democrat in there is not going to be voting for him.
Yeah, and the argument that it should be delayed because there's this air of suspicion around President Trump, I think that that's a little tougher to sell. So the documents, it's like, all right, what you're saying makes sense, but they definitely want this to move along a lot faster. Mm-hmm. They don't want this to get too close to the election one way or the other. I assume anyway. And so I find it interesting, but I feel like I don't know. I don't pretend to know everything. I feel like this is a fairly standard operating procedure when it's like, you're going to just dump a document on people when they don't have time to read it. And it's a favorite quote of the right. Nancy Pelosi, when they passed Obamacare, said, well, we have to pass it so we can read what's into it. Well, no, you should probably take the time to read it and then decide whether or not you should pass it. And the same thing, I think, logically applies here. I just found the whole thing was so showy, but immensely entertaining.
It certainly was. But that's a fair question to ask, too. Does a rigged election allow a Supreme Court justice who might potentially serve for many, many, many years and will also, of course, sway the court? I also have to bring this up, and I don't know if you saw it. So there was video or meme of a woman sitting behind Kavanaugh for half the time, holding up her hand like this. I don't know if you guys can see it, which is
for those watching on YouTube, it's some kind of white power salute. Now, the only thing that I'll say about that is the sources where I saw the close-up of that video I don't like to throw around fake news. I don't know how much I trust where that was. Now, I saw that woman sitting behind him, and I wasn't looking to see her hand, so I'm not saying I didn't see it, but I do wonder, and maybe if anybody watching has, a better...
I mean, I didn't see it on InfoWars or anything like that. What was the source?
But I know you're a fan. Well,
Alex Jones and
I saw it on Twitter, and away I'm like, I don't know how much I trust that, But
I saw it on Facebook as well. But, I mean, I don't know if it was altered or not, but it definitely looked really suspicious, the manner in which he was holding her hand for so long that way. And then even the look on his face and his positioning himself in a way so that was prominent as well, I thought was odd.
Yeah, and I mean, I always find these things, look, it's one of those things where you're like, well, if it's true, that is certainly something that I am concerned about.
And she held it there apparently for a very long time. Oh, is that live? I'm not live, but is that a video or a picture? So.
I'm looking at.
Oh, it looks like it's
I'm looking at a lot of sources, and they're all just people posting an image that I think they're all sharing from something.
Right.
And now a conservative outlet, for sure. This is Ben Shapiro's outlet, but this does come up on Twitter. The Daily Wire points out they have the still where her hands are folded in her lap. Now, look, she sat there for a long time, but I do have to say that, look, they're zooming in on somebody who is watching MSNBC, and it looks like that's what the image is. But again, I don't believe a lot of what I see anymore.
And I can also say, I could understand how she just changes her hands. I talk with my hands a ton as a Latina. We change our hands. But that's a very particular hand gesture to be holding, which is not necessarily comfortable. So I don't. Here I am with my conspiracy theories.
No, and I don't know. I mean, and I guess
she's an attorney too. It says defense attorney.
Well, yeah, and the man's wife is very upset that people are accusing her of. And the woman's name is Zena Bash. She is a Washington D.C. attorney.
I wonder.
And she worked as a law clerk for Kavanaugh. And then her husband did take to online to say that. Take to online. I sound like I'm 70 years old. He took to the computers.
The interwebs.
Yeah, he went to the interwebs and he spun it. So I saw that meme, and this is a perfect example of, even though somebody looked like they were zooming in on something that had the MSNBC graphic, and I'm not going so far as to say that, if I see it on MSNBC, I'm going to say that it's not real. No, if MSNBC's official account tweeted that, I would be like, all right, I guess that's what they saw. Right. But what I'm seeing is somebody allegedly goes up to their TV and films it.
Right.
So obviously, very troubling. But I also feel like a white power salute, that's not really a day one thing. You save that for day 2 or day 3.
At least towards the end.
Yeah, at least towards the end.
And then there was also the controversial photo that was circulated on a lot of mainstream media of the Parkland survivors. Did you see that?
I don't know if I did see
The father
that.
of one of the Parkland survivors went up to Kavanaugh towards the end to shake his hand and speak with him, and he refused to shake his hand. And we know that the NRA has given a lot of money to Kavanaugh's nomination. So there's been speculation regarding that as well, which is really unfortunate. I don't know if you can find that.
Right. Yeah. Well, everything's out there. I mean, according to a photo from the Toronto Star, and, if you're in Canada, that is a reputable publication. And, there's also video where the man tries to shake his hand. But I guess he says that his daughter was murdered in Parkland. And I guess he feels like that's not a hand that he wants to shake. Honestly, no matter how you feel about it, I think for politics' sake, you should always shake a hand that comes out. I mean, unless
I think you should shake any human being's hand who's just trying to.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to look like somebody who should be, who should basically be approved for the Supreme Court. And Jeff has found an image of it. The Washington Post, Brett Kavanaugh says that the Parkland victim's father had his back turned to him when he tried to shake his hand. So that seems like, that's the thing that makes me question the white power thing, because very quickly you look for this and you're able to find from very reputable, the video's also ABC News, so I'm seeing it enough places. That other thing I didn't see from anywhere that I really trusted, and I'm not even saying it's not real, the other thing. I'm just like, I always question that. Anyway.
Sure, and it's all speculative, of course. We just see her making a hand gesture. That's not an indication of anything, of course. So we're not throwing that out there, but we also just want to talk about.
Yeah, we just talk about the things that we've seen. So this was really just the first day, and there was a lot of posturing, a lot of grandstanding, as I said, and even Ted Cruz was there. And as he was talking, I'm like, oh, he's going to run for president again, isn't he? I just wasn't. I hadn't thought about it, which is so weird because I seem to remember that
I think Beto should run.
Didn't his father try and kill Fidel Castro? So I thought I heard that from a really reliable source. I believe someone is the president. So I don't know that he can.
I think the president said a lot of horrible things about his family members, but I
well,
digress.
You do digress. Someone who he didn't say a lot of terrible things about, but President Trump said one terrible thing in particular about John McCain. And it was really, I like people who don't get captured.
That's so idiotic.
You can kind of negate everything else he ever said about him, because it's like, no, that's a really terrible thing to say. So, of course, you are not invited to the funeral.
Yeah.
And that was a very public showing, I think, of just like, hey, take a look. You're not coming. Here's who I want to speak. People who I see as presidential, Barack Obama, who defeated him in election. George W. Bush, who defeated him in a primary.
Right.
And, it's funny. I was talking about this just earlier on my personal podcast, the Blattcast, about George W. Bush, speaking at John McCain's funeral. And there was an image that you saw a lot from the right during Obama's presidency, and it was a picture of George W. Bush laughing, and it just said, "Miss me yet?" But now I feel like that's a bipartisan thing where people just thought George Bush was the worst thing that could ever happen to this country, that could ever happen to the White House. And now, on this very show, we've talked about people are just like, oh no, we would definitely take him. If he could go for a third term instead of a second Trump term, we'll just go ahead and take that instead. Obviously, they want
insert old president here.
Yeah, right, exactly. They take Bill Clinton. Is Jimmy Carter still alive? I think he is.
I think he is.
He's in his 90s.
Still building homes for Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, he does a lot more than I do. But I thought it was interesting because there were a lot of people speaking about the John McCain funeral, saying that, I can't believe that George W. Bush in particular, but also Barack Obama and Meghan McCain politicized this event. And I was like, well, first of all, he was a lifelong politician who served in the military before that. So it's probably going to be a political conversation. And I think if he had passed away a few years ago, I don't think there would have been swipes at Obama who, beat him in the 2008 election. But this is a guy who said some really crappy things about him. So I don't know. I kind of like that they used the opportunity for this funeral to speak out against someone. Look, George W. Bush doesn't speak out a lot about. He didn't speak out about Obama. He doesn't say that much about Trump. Usually it's thinly veiled. Mostly he's just happy to paint. But
or share some candy with Michelle.
Well, that was I'm glad you mentioned that. That was like a great little viral moment that it's hard not to like. It's hard not to like George W. Bush in this moment where he's like a naughty kid who just like slips Michelle Obama just a little bit of candy.
That's him all the time though. There are so many moments like that where you just kind of you're just think it's so cute. But
so yeah, give us your thoughts on sort of the way that the politicization of the funeral. And I for one am not surprised, and I feel like everyone there felt like it was a great opportunity for them to make these points.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I wasn't against McCain's wants or wishes, given that even his final note to Americans was somewhat political as well. I don't know if you saw his last words that he wanted to be read.
I did see that.
That statement was somewhat political also.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Meghan McCain, his daughter, who knows her father better than anyone, his family members know John better than anyone, would do something against his wishes or make it into something, use it as a platform or use it as something that they wouldn't want, that he wouldn't want said or done. And that's his family. If that's how they choose to carry out their funeral on his last time on earth, then so be it. They're allowed to do that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I was just more than a little surprised at how upset people were. And I think it was because they took it personally that it was George W. Bush. It was somebody that they, as in like conservatives that I follow on Twitter, that they felt like he was their guy, and they defended him for years and continued to defend him, and they felt like
they know where George W. Bush stands.
Yeah, like
some Republicans have a line that they eventually draw and say, this is where I stand. So I'm glad that he did that.
I think there are a number of Republicans who have drawn that line, but it's an invisible line that you'll never actually see because they don't want to let you know.
And
how
McCain
they feel.
drew that line and withdrew at certain times as well. When he voted against the when he was a deciding vote with the Health Care Act.
Yeah, and I think that alone is what, that's what set Trump off more than anything. He'd said the I like people don't get captured thing long before that.
Right.
I did want to talk about another funeral that was last week, and this is one of our lighthearted topics here.
A very long funeral.
Both of these funerals were like 3 days long, and I'm talking about the Aretha Franklin funeral. And first of all, she had 4 wardrobe changes in the funeral as a deceased person. I was going to use the term corpse, and that sounds like a terrible thing to say to the ultimate diva. So there were definitely 4 costume changes during the course of the show.
That's amazing.
And I was just like, well, that's stunning. But what I really was surprised by was the fact that we really saw some interesting reactions to Ariana Grande performing. Now, I'm not a fan of Ariana Grande. But
she has a great voice.
I was going to say, she has a great voice. When she sang that song, she sang You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. And there were some men in attendance that did not treat her like a natural woman. And there was initially a lot of attention played to the fact that she wore that dress, and it was a short dress for a funeral. But at the same time,
she's also a performer.
She's a performer. She was there to perform, and I don't think Aretha would have been like, can you believe that girl wore that short dress? She would have been like, oh.
Aretha's a diva. She would have been like, you do you, honey.
Aretha might have said the dress was a little long.
Right.
She would have been like, why don't you take it up a little bit in the back? You know what I'm saying.
And she's young.
Yeah, she is young. Yeah, is she 21? I don't even.
I think so.
Yeah, I
think
believe that's how
like
old she is. So
20,
there were a couple of things that I saw while this was on, and I'll admit that this was on while I was at the gym as well. Not that I spent that much time.
Your gym time.
Yeah,
Gym
3 hours
laundry.
a week just happened to be during this. So the first one I would like to show Jeff, that one right there. You see, and it's look, you can't help but laugh because there's Bill Clinton. He's like, I don't know what an Ariana Grande is, but can you bring one of those over this way?
I'll take a grande.
Hillary's way in the back. She made me Ariana Venti, if you know what I'm saying. And I think that I was looking at that and I'm like, oh, Bill, come on. And I'm like,
you know how long I've said this, Christian? I feel like every time I'm at this table, I'll say that Democrats are going to pay for, excuse my language, that BJ for the rest of our lives. Because if Bill even looks sideways at a woman, then
Well-
it's going to be like Dirty Bill, who should have been impeached, and blah, 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 blah.
And here's the thing. Without the Monica Lewinsky situation, there are still a lot of allegations against him. They just
Yeah.
didn't happen in the White House.
that whole Paula Jones thing.
Yeah, well, look, you can discount a few of them, and it's sort of like the argument that was made when the Harvey Weinstein was starting to happen. It's like, look, you want to throw out half of them. That's still a lot. Bill
Yeah, no,
Cosby,
I
the same
agree.
thing. It's
And
like
I'm not
there were like
discounting these
62
women's
accusers of Bill
accusations
Cosby.
by any means,
No,
but-
but some of them could have been politically motivated, but I do
Absolutely.
wonder if they all are. And I think,
gather that some of them probably weren't, and that it
yeah.
potentially
And there was an
happened.
actual situation.
Yeah.
But so this happens, and Jeff is showing an image on Twitter. The difference between Bill Clinton seeing something that he enjoys and something that he doesn't. Now, I'm surprised that no one has made the GIF, we're going to stick with that, of it being Hillary there speaking and he's making that face where he's asleep, because I'm surprised that's not out there. Somebody could make that. But the interesting thing is I was looking at that and I'm like, oh, Bill, come on. You just can't help yourself, you old horn dog. And in a way I was like, it's kind of funny. He's like, hey, Jesse, check it out. Look at Ariana Grande's.
You sound a lot like him.
I try. That's like a half impression that I try to do. But he also, there was that moment, and then there was then an interaction with Bishop Charles H. Ellis III, which is
Oh,
a
now that's
subsequent photo.
cringeworthy.
And we have had Juliet return to us in the booth now. And the bishop, well, he got a little familiar, which he apologized for. And I mean, you can see how uncomfortable he is. You know, just before we started, I was talking to Juliet about that body language is very apparent. Like, I would like you to not touch me, but it's a funeral. You're a man of God. I'm not going to slap you, but would you please take your
why.
hand off me? It just sort of reminded me of basically before I met my wife. Anytime I ever went in for a kiss, I got that body language, and I'm like, oh, I have really misread this situation. But Bishop Don Magic Wand, and no, this is not Bishop Don Magic Wand. This is Bishop Charles H. Ellis III. He just thought, like, well, let me just get a little closer. And you can kind of see there's, I think, an additional picture where his hand is really somewhere it should not be. And
she's
even she
actually
can't
looking
believe
down.
it. She's like, there's no way this is really happening.
Did you see the video?
I saw it
so at
live,
first I
yeah.
was like, well, you know, I was trying to rationalize it. I was
I
like, well,
was
it doesn't
too.
look that bad. It looks like he's just holding her on the side, and if you kind of see, you could see it in both ways, and he's really not trying to touch her boob. But then the hands do get a little close, so it's hard to gather. But I will say, as a woman, I've been in that position before, and I've experienced that, and it's quite possible that he was trying to cop a feel, which is really dumb given you're in front of thousands of people on television.
Because I don't have the perspective that you would have on this, do you think that a guy, when he does that, thinks that, like, either one, well, she's not going to have a problem with this, or, oh, she won't notice? Do you think that that's why a guy does that? Or are they hoping you notice and that it's well received?
I don't know. I think they just like to push the boundaries,
Yeah.
and they're just kind of like in that moment, and they're thinking, how much can I get away with type deal.
Yeah.
Not even maybe she won't notice, but I'm hoping she just lets it go. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Although, you remember the Taylor Swift incident where she was taking a picture and
with a fan, right?
The fan
Who,
or
like-
the photographer or someone
Oh,
like that,
yeah.
camera guy, he like grabbed her butt from behind, but you couldn't see it,
yeah.
and then all of that happened. I mean, it happens like in front of the whole world.
And I'm just surprised when it happens. You know, not that it happens, but that, you know, it happens at a funeral. You know,
Yeah, that's really sad.
Yeah, so it was very surprising, but so it's loosely connected to politics because of the fact that Bill Clinton was there.
Right.
But one other point I wanted to make about that funeral was that seated behind, I guess it was the dais, I don't know what you call it there in the church, but you had Bill Clinton, and then next to him, you had Jesse Jackson. And next to Jesse Jackson, you had Al Sharpton. And then next to Al Sharpton, you had Reverend Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam.
Right.
Now, now you did point out it was a Washington Times article that called into question about some of the media outlets who cropped that photo and cropped Louis Farrakhan out of it. Now, there are a lot of reasons why you might crop Louis Farrakhan out of it.
Oh, yeah.
One might be he's not as well known. Honestly, I would have probably also cropped out Al Sharpton. He's lost too much weight. He's a little scary looking at this point. But I just sort of like the idea that the seating arrangement is you have Bill Clinton and then like, well, Jesse's a pretty normal guy. He ran for president in 1984. Sure. Al Sharpton is a little out there, but he's really cleaned up his act. And then it's like, oh yeah. Reverend Louis Farrakhan's, we could put his seat a little further away.
Yeah.
If only we could. So I think that it's not surprising that he's there because I would assume that the Nation of Islam and Aretha Franklin probably found themselves with a lot of common interests in terms of fundraising. Obviously.
He did preside over the Million Man March as well.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of instances that you can point to. It's just how quickly people are trying to separate him from Bill Clinton. Like, in terms of the seating, it's like, let's put him as far away as we can.
Right.
And then also the idea that the photo was cropped out. Let's just say, for argument's sake, say that a reputable news organization did crop Louis Farrakhan out of the photo. Do you have a problem with that? And we're just assuming it happened. We're not going to call anybody out for that.
First of all, I could absolutely see how and why they would crop him out, given his controversial statements regarding Jews.
Mostly Jews, yeah.
And white people.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been accused of anti-Semitism and reverse racism, I guess you'd say. I don't know that I would necessarily, maybe, like you said, I think that some major media outlets might have just felt that he wasn't prominent enough to include
get Bill
in the
Clinton
picture.
bigger in the picture.
Exactly. But I could see how it could be viewed that way, how a conservative outlet like Washington Times could think, oh, well, they just want to be sure that this prominent Democrat, Bill Clinton, for example, is nowhere near or even associated with a man like Louis Farrakhan.
I was very surprised that he was sitting where he was, that I saw him so much. I was just like, wow, that's Louis Farrakhan.
Likewise.
And, although he maybe has spoken out against my race, I don't hold anything personally against him. But I was definitely surprised that he had such a good seat. And I don't know, I can see why. There are a few people. I bet Bill Clinton didn't shake his hand because he didn't want that photo op. If anything, maybe he gave him like a hey, what's up?
Yeah, I'm curious to know how strong of a relationship he did have with Aretha Franklin, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, if he's there. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Anyway, so that was our fun, lighter topic. And we'll keep things a little bit light as we talk about one of the things I wanted to make sure we got to. There are a couple of boycotts going on right now.
Oh, boy.
And this is a really big one on social media because people are very proud to let you know when they've decided not to do something. And they will let you know that they are banning In-N-Out Burger, which a lot of you in our audience don't have as an option. They're only really in basically the West Coast. It goes out to Texas now. They go a little further than they used to. That's as far as it goes, though, because they don't freeze their meat and they don't want to be on the truck too long. Exactly. So these are all things that if Chelsea were here, I would say, Chelsea, I know you don't think we should eat meat.
Chelsea would be a big proponent. So
I would say, I know Chelsea doesn't think we should eat meat. I know she doesn't like fast food in general.
Is she vegetarian?
She is.
I didn't know that.
So, but I would like, if you had to give credit to one, it would probably be In-N-Out Burger. Now, you can't be shocked that they would donate to the Republican Party, because if you've ever been there, there are Bible verses on the cups, and there's a different one on the fries and a different one on the placemat. So they're pretty upfront about who they are. It's like people were surprised that
Chick-fil-A.
Like Chick-fil-A, they're not open on Sundays. Yeah. They turn down.
Are they closed on Sundays?
They're closed on Sundays because they think you should spend that day with your families. Yeah, well. I know because my son likes to go there because they have a fun little play place. And I'm like, well, we can't go on Sunday. But, and it's just, these are organizations that you're like, yeah, look, that's what they want to do. Now, I think a smart organization might donate to Republicans and Democrats.
So they put out, I just read right before we came in that they said that they do donate equally to both Democrats and Republicans. And they donate based on, of course, their policies regarding, fair labor rule laws and anything that's obviously going to be beneficial to restaurants and their companies and their employees. They said they donate to both, just so you guys know.
Right. And look, I mean, I know for a fact it's well documented. Donald Trump donated to Hillary Clinton's campains in the past. So, people donate money to a lot of things.
Campaigns.
Yeah, exactly. So people donate to a lot of things. And it's just the level of, not even discourse, of just communication is how quick people were to say like, well, I'm done with In-N-Out. I'm like, look, that's your choice. The lines are too long there anyway.
So wasn't it a Democratic congressman, and I forget whom, tweeted out that he'd found out about this donation and that he felt like that others should boycott. But then he was like, well, it was more just like a...
Yeah. He's like, well, I still need a double-double.
I was just kind of exaggerating. I just had a double protein style right before I came here.
Good
and
for
I
you
will
that you
not
went protein
stop.
style.
I always go protein
Well,
style.
that's my thing, too. It's like, look, I can understand, and there has to be a line for everybody. If somebody doesn't want to eat an In-N-Out burger anymore, good for them. But don't chastise anybody else who's like, well, I'm not taking this stand because that's not as important to me, Right. And like the fact that, look, my wife and I were talking about, oh, it'd be fun because, like when we were kids, you'd sometimes have a birthday party like at McDonald's. And we're like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to do at Chick-fil-A? And we're like, do you really want to be the kid at school that sent out the invites? Like, come to my birthday party at Chick-fil-A. Do you want to get judged by all those parents?
Chick-fil-A is so good,
Yeah, but
too.
you don't want to be judged by all those Hollywood parents that are like, oh, no.
Oh, those major libs are going to be like, we're not going there.
Right. And then they're probably like, and you can't be friends with Felix anymore. And I can't do that.
And throw out your Nike stuff.
Well, we're going to get to that in a moment. So I don't know. And it was just people are just saying things that just aren't true. They're just, well, it's not that good anyway. No, it's delicious.
It's so
It's
good.
really good. And that has a lot to do with it. Because, if people wanted to boycott Whataburger, I know you're from Texas. They wanted to boycott.
Whataburger's so good.
Yeah, but it's not. It's just flat and it tastes like
It's
the
really
paper.
good. You know what it is? No, I no longer drink, but it's that place that you go after you've been out all night till 2 a.m, and you just get used to it being the place that's open 24
Sure.
hours. So then you develop this exaggerated loving of it because you thought it was good because you were really drunk.
Right.
Because you've always had it
my
drunk.
example
so then,
of that being from New York
when
is...
you're sober, you still get those neurons still fire in the same
Yeah.
way. So we all think it's good.
My example of that being from New York is White Castle, because when I
never
was
had
out
White
late,
Castle.
well, it's it's a semi-regional thing. You can find it throughout the South and in the Midwest and stuff. But and by the way, Juliet has an amazing close-up of an In-N-Out
Of a
double-double.
double-double.
Not animal style, not protein style, but you know what? Still delicious all
It'll
the
work.
same. And I was like, it'll get the job done.
I still want to eat that.
Yeah,
right now.
and so you definitely associate certain things with experiences, and I can understand that.
Kind of like you think that like that horrible food on the street too, that you like get outside of a club at night.
Oh, like the
smells
hot
really
dog
good. You're
wrapped
like,
in
that's
bacon?
really good, but then like
I used to occasionally buy the hot dog wrapped in bacon after a USC game. That's where my wife went to school, so we would go to the football games.
Mm-hmm.
And I would eat it. I'm like, oh, it tastes good. But it doesn't feel so good when it's sitting in your
afterwards,
stomach.
I never had them, but
Good for you.
it always smelled really good.
They smell great.
Because I was so hungry.
Yeah. Anyway, so we talked a little bit about that part of it. Okay. And then you alluded to there is now the other side of this, which you had conservatives who were saying, like, I can't believe you're protesting In-N-Out. This is stupid. It's just donating. And then all of a sudden Nike has an ad with Colin Kaepernick, and it says basically that something about standing up for what you believe in, even when you lose everything.
Even when you have to sacrifice
Right,
everything.
even when you have to, yeah, exactly. Thank you for remembering better than I did.
I've seen
And-
it so many times.
Something, even if it means sacrificing everything.
Everything. Thank you, Juliet. Yes. And I think, look, it's a very effective ad. And the best thing about this ad, you don't have to get the NFL to sign off on it because nobody's given him a job. Now,
I think it's great that they've given him a job.
they've given him a job on Nike. They've given him some money. And here's the thing that I'll say about Colin Kaepernick without turning this into a sports conversation. He is good enough that he could have a job on one of these 32 teams. There are not 32 quarterbacks who are better than him. There are probably 20, but he's not so bad that he shouldn't have a job. He shouldn't have a job as a backup. He might not want a job as a backup, so he might hold out for it. But so the fact that he's suing because, he feels like they got together and said, we're not going to hire this guy.
Yeah.
So good for him. And I hope that Nike gave him a ton of money for this. And we made the joke up at the top, which was written by our friend Tamra, who wasn't able to be here tonight, but we hope she's feeling better soon. That I don't think Nike cares. Go ahead.
I think Nike is considering their demographic as well and saying, you know what, this isn't. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
this hurts. This helps them more than it hurts them.
Yeah,
That's what
but
I was gonna say.
also bad press. If it's bad press for some people, if they see it that way. And there are a lot of people in my life. I'm friends with a lot of law enforcement, and some people might not be happy with my saying this, but he's standing up for social justice for people for brown and black people, and that doesn't mean that he's necessarily anti-cop or anti-law enforcement. And people think that they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
That if I'm with Cap, then I'm against cops, and that's just not the case. Because I'm with Cap and I'm for cops.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like you have to sort of micromanage every statement now, because it's like you're not protesting police, you're protesting a number of instances where you've seen there's videos in some of these cases. So it's like you've seen it happen. It has happened. There are bad seeds in every organization, and that's not saying that all of our guys in blue are bad people, but we've seen these social injustices. We know that brown and black people are indiscriminately are shot at higher numbers. I mean, I could go on, and he is protesting in a peaceful manner, which is what America was founded upon. And I believe in his right to do that. And I think this is amazing and beautiful and wonderful. And it is unfortunate that the NFL is essentially, blocked him out altogether because he's standing up for something he believes in. So yeah, I'm all for it. And I think that at the same time, players who feel like, no, I would like to stand for the national anthem, I think don't call them out either. It's just like, this is how people... You have a right to your opinion. And also, it's probably not something that they... I don't know. At least I know in baseball, they usually cut away before the national anthem to get some commercials in. So if it makes networks or team owners uncomfortable, then you don't have to show the people kneeling. But then because you have NBC and Bob Costas, who really I'm using him as particular because he's been so outspoken on it. They really want to focus on it and show it and highlight it, which is great. But if you don't want to show it, then don't. Right. And people who are really that upset about it. I guess that they won't watch football, but I think some of them are like, oh, I don't like that, but I still want, say, the Broncos to win the Super Bowl. And then he has a right to do that. And of course, we'll get into the whole public and private. This is a private company, and they can ban the person from doing that. But essentially, even veterans say that they fought for Americans' rights to peacefully protest. You know what I think is interesting? I don't know if you've seen a mocked up version of Tillman. Is that his name? Pat Tillman, yeah, who had a promising NFL career, and he left after 9/11 to go fight in, I want to say Afghanistan, and he died there. Right. Yeah. And what's ironic is that they have a mocked up version of Pat Tillman and with the same wording over his face saying that, he sacrificed everything. But I don't know if conservatives know or have done their research, but I think that Pat Tillman died from friendly fire. It was the good guys who accidentally killed him. Yeah. He didn't go in and die against the enemy. So I find that a little, I don't know if that's the best example. Look, I understand he was still died in service to our country. Absolutely. Sacrificing everything for our country, and he is as well as a hero, but I just find it interesting that they chose that person. And then of course there are some other ones that are just horrific. Well, like a Trump one with New Balance. Yeah, it's the internet after all. I know, it's amazing. But a lot of the same people who are posting videos, setting their Nikes on fire, were saying that it's stupid to protest in and out. So it's not stupid for anybody to decide not to do anything. Just don't try and get me. What's the point of setting your Nikes on fire or cutting up your stuff? You've already paid for it. Yeah, like if you can figure out a way to return it and get your money back, now you're talking. Right. Or the meme that's going around that says that you should donate it to homeless. Yeah, which I think that, that's a great point. That would be great if you really don't want it. Yeah, because it's just like, do you think that people, do you think that like a kid whose parents can't afford to buy new shoes and, he has like third generation hand-me-down shoes, do you think he'd be okay with getting a pair of Nikes just because you don't like what Nike did in a commercial? I think, that's the ultimate thing. If you don't want to buy more Nikes, don't buy more Nikes, but don't set them on fire. I love Nike and before Cap. So I don't know. I will continue with my Nike. I feel like setting shoes on fire is bad for the environment too. Did you see that one tweet where a guy did set his shoes on fire and they're on his feet? I don't know if that's mocked up either. Did you see that? I didn't. And he had like third-degree burns. I have to gather that was fake, but it was pretty funny. There's a lot of fake stories out there. It's not even fake news. It's just fake internet. Yeah. I know, Juliet, we are basically out of time. Do we have any more time, or should we wrap it up? I know this is less than professional. We had so much fun. But I know we had too much. I like this whole. I'll give you 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes. Thank you, Juliet. You know what? If Jeff was still in the booth, he would have been like, "No, you guys should be done already." So thank you, Juliet. I'm just special like that.
We love you, Juliet.
You know, Juliet, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but as someone who was born in France and you hear all this stuff, what do you think about what's going on in this country right now? Is it crazier than when you first...
It's very entertaining, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's definitely the word I would go with, entertaining. But yeah, it is a little saddening. Americans love a scandal. This is not new to 2018. It's not new to 5 years ago. That's just how it is. Americans love a scandal.
That's true.
So this is just another one of them. Everybody likes to give their opinion, which is good. It's good to give your opinion, but it's just not, when it comes to Nike and as you're saying, burning things, it's definitely not the smartest way to use our time.
Yeah, and it's like, it's fine, like I say, it's fine to have an opinion, but then just know someone else is going to have another opinion.
Yeah.
And part of having an opinion is, I am going to donate to a party that you might not vote for.
Right. And it's just, where is our focus going? It just seems like everyone's focused, whether depending if you're Democrat, Republican, whatever you are, green, black, blue, it's not focused where it should be.
Yeah. I definitely agree. Well, thank you, Juliet, for sharing.
I agree. It really should be on the
Thank you for letting me
policies.
put you on the spot like that. So one of the things that we'll have to talk more about next week, I'll just touch on it very briefly, is there's this Bob Woodward book coming out. And this was another thing. There was like split screen while I was at the gym because CNN was like, oh, do we cover the Kavanaugh? Do we talk about some of the leaks out of the Bob Woodward book?
It's juicy, too.
And he just talks about the crazy town that the White House is and the fact that Trump aides took papers off of his desk in the interest of national security. And, a lot of times when you get these books, they're based on, legitimate interviews with people, and they may just be one or two persons' perspective on it. But it's really entertaining. Now, the little bit that you were able to see of it, and look, the book's not out yet. So I think when the book comes out, then I bet Drexel will probably read it overnight, and we'll be able to get him the next day because he's always ready to read those books. He loves reading those books. But in the interim, we'll just talk for a minute about some of what we're seeing. What are you thinking about what you're hearing about?
Well, I thought it's interesting that he quotes John Kelly, for example, directly and says that John Kelly has said that working with Trump, and this is just what he's quoting John Kelly as having said, was that Trump was an idiot, that it was like pointless even going to him, that he was like a national security threat, and this is the worst job he's ever had. John Kelly's supposed to be, Trump's on his side, apparently. So that was interesting. And I will say this, Bob Woodward is a reputable journalist who has done some hard-hitting, honest journalism. So I don't take what he's written lightly at all,
Yeah, I mean...
This is not like some random, it's not like The Fury of the last book. Now I forget what it was called.
Yeah, I know the book you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these books that come out, you're like, but I mean, yeah, this is Bob Woodward.
Yeah. This is the Bob Woodward.
Guy. This is the guy who, with Carl Bernstein, brought down Nixon.
Exactly.
So this guy, I think, has some good sources. And yes, I know that's 45 years ago, but at the same time, I think his book has a little bit more weight. And the final thing I'll end on is the fact that now Trump is saying he's upset that he wasn't interviewed for the book. And he's blaming Kellyanne Conway. He's saying it's her fault that he didn't get interviewed for it. So anyway, we will have some more of these assembled for next week. There's really just like 4 or 5 very tasty tidbits that are out there.
Yeah, we'll take out our own favorite excerpts. It'll be so much fun.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, so thanks to everybody who was in the chat. And Chief of Staff John Kelly describes Trump as an idiot and unhinged, according to Woodward. That's from R. Scott Brown. Thanks, R. Scott Brown. And Storage Yard resident and someone named Mr. T in the chat who's not the actual Mr. T, but we appreciate it all the same.
That you know of.
Well, that's true. The avatar doesn't look
Pity
like
the fool.
Anyway, Brooke, thanks so much for coming back.
So much fun.
I hope that now that we're back on Tuesdays, this is going to work better in your schedule.
So better.
Okay, good, because we are back to Tuesdays at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern, so you will be sure to find us here again next Tuesday, and hopefully we get the whole band back together. But until then, you can find me on Twitter at ChristianDMZ and Instagram. Brooke, where do people find you?
Hey guys, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Brooke Soliz TV.
And in the booth, we have Juliet, and I believe is it Juliet Bonjour on Instagram?
At Bonjour Juliet.
At Bonjour Juliet.
Thank
you
you.
have a Twitter, but you don't use it, right?
Nah.
Yeah. So you're all about
I leave Trump. Trump gets it. He has Twitter handled for me.
Yeah, basically Trump. Yeah, Trump just takes care of it. You're like, I'm an IG girl, so you can find Juliet over there.
Thank
you,
you,
Juliet, for helping us out, and to Brooke and to everybody. We will see you next week. Thanks so much, everyone.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.